Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining me on a new episode of the Music Reviewer Podcast, the week of March 6th, for Best and Worst Track of the Week. If you're new to the Music Reviewer Podcast, thanks for joining me on this weekly segment. All I do is take all new entries onto the Billboard Hot 100, take one that's the worst, take one that's the best, and then also grade each other song with a letter grade. But if it's your first time joining me on the podcast in general, I also do album reviews. From time to time, I'm going to try to push out more here soon. But nonetheless, for this week of Best and Worst Track of the Week, we have a few interesting artists, some artists we typically don't cover that make it onto the Hot 100. Some tracks from Tiesto, Jake Owen, 6ix9ine's pretty frequent occurrence, Kane, a newer artist, Lil Yachty, Ariana Grande, Uchis. So if any of that interests you, just stick around for some track reviews from those artists. Overall, I feel like the week was pretty interesting. I feel like it was favorable for the most part. A lot of the tracks, especially on like the bottom part of the chart, I thought were pretty decent and solid overall. One of the better weeks, I'd say, in terms of like quality, but unfortunately everything was debuted very low, and I just don't see it really growing anywhere. A lot of this stuff just seems like it's a one-shot weekly thing that might just drop out soon after, but hopefully I'm proven wrong by that. And if you didn't tune in last week, comparison to last week, we dropped, ended up being Nipsey Hussle and Jay-Z with their track versus Giveon. We got Worst Track of the Week. Feel like this week in general, just kind of definitely blew that week out of the water in terms of what came in. It was kind of lukewarm even on that Nipsey Hussle track. Even though I thought it was pretty good, I think this week's track's a little bit better. And just before we get started, I want to let everyone know the latest episode that dropped actually didn't drop traditionally on the podcast as a regular episode. It's on YouTube right now. It is a sort of one-off YouTube-only episode for the time being. For just some general track reviews, I kind of got the idea of just maybe dropping a track review list of just some more recent contemporary songs from various artists, mainly artists that I typically don't cover on the Hot 100, so a lot of indie and alt stuff, but also just some rap. Like, for instance, I covered the latest Jid song on there, but also other artists such as like Wallows, Julian Baker, and then also like Wolf Alice, Still Woozy. So if anyone wants to check out, that's on the YouTube channel. Just search the Music Reviewer. You will find it as the latest episode. My cat's on the thumbnail, if that helps you find it. But mainly just wanted to do that because Best and Worst Track of the Week, the scheduling and the way I drop it, and then also how delayed the Hot 100 is. By the time I'm covering a lot of these tracks, they're not per se that new. They're still new, but they're not like fresh out of the oven new. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started on this week's episode. And also, just in case anyone missed it, I covered the latest Arlo Parks album, Collapsed in Sunbeams. Basically, at this point, a week ago, maybe even more than that. If you're interested in that album, check it out because I thought it was a solid album. But I also dropped a review for that right here on the podcast. But let's go ahead and get into the gist of this episode. So some highlights I found this week. Driver's License, still at number 1 by Olivia Rodrigo. Like I mentioned the past episode, this track really has some traction and steam. I don't know how long I can keep it going, but nonetheless, the consistency of staying at number 1 for such a long time is pretty impressive, especially for an artist that really has no back catalog or much reputation other than this track. Up by Cardi B, up to number 2. I mentioned last week I thought I was a little bit disappointed how it didn't. Its trajectory fell after its debut, but it looks like it kind of rebounded. Wouldn't be surprised if this eventually takes number 1 in the coming weeks. Also, I felt like the top 10 was kind of just pretty as expected. I think that Chris Brown track went to number 3, but it is riding off of some remix steam, so not really that impressive. in that respect. Whoopty by CJ, that one track I covered months ago at this point, up to number 14. Still don't see what the appeal of that track is really, but apparently some people are really digging it. You Broke Me First by Tate McRae up to number 21. I keep on seeing this slowly climbing. I feel like this is another like sort of AJR Bang situation where it could probably end up cracking the top 10 if it really wants to get up there. We'll see. No More Parties by Coi Leray shot up to number 32 off of like a little Dirk remix that I guess came out. But nonetheless, big jump on that. We'll see. I don't know if that's just a fluke, probably because of the remix traction, but really didn't think the track was all that memorable either. Also, the Goosebumps remix by HVME by the Travis Scott song up to 56. I'm just kind of surprised this has hung around as long as it has because it wasn't a very interesting remix in my opinion. It didn't really make the track all that much more interesting. And then also Monster by Justin Bieber and Shawn Mendes down to 98. It's almost out of here. I feel like the track honestly could have had some more prominence. I wasn't really a huge fan of the track, but I felt like the two could have made a better collab. And then also some dropouts. Love Story, the remade version of the Taylor Swift track, dropped out. Kind of not surprised there, but kind of surprised here that Louis Capaldi's Before You Go dropped out. I think it was quite high last week, but I think the once profound nature and then popularity of the track is pretty much gone at this point. So it had its run, but we will get to a substitution for Louis Capaldi here later in the episode. And then So Done by the Kid Laroi dropped out. Terrible track. Surprised it hung around as long as it did. And then How They Remember You from last week by Rascal Flatts dropped out also. So thought that was a pretty decent track for what it was. But hey, I'm not really surprised Rascal Flatts isn't really making any huge pop hits either. So first track we're covering this week is Trackstar by Mooski at number 9. Looks like this artist is a newer one because I've never heard any of their work. Not too interested in anything else off of hearing this track. I maybe will pay attention more to what Mooski does if this track gains a little bit more prominence. But I will say it's not a bad track. It has some dance hall flavor to it, some welling vocals that are soaked with reverb and some really interesting vibrato. Not bad, I guess. It's interesting for what it is. Some in the vocals, there's some interesting rhythmic passages that you don't really get too much from like this kind of R&B pop music sort of style. And also some smooth and deep bass lines at times on the track that I guess make it a little bit nicer overall. I give this track a B. Next track was The Business by Tiesto at 96. I will say that dark and demonic tuned down vocal is not bad, especially how it fits on the track. I guess it makes the track a bit more memorable. I love the punchy bass groove structuring the track, the slappy snare sound. Interesting seeing a true EDM track on here. We aren't really getting much of those lately, so especially from a really big EDM artist like Tiesto. So yeah, not a bad track. It grooves. I give it a B+. Next track was Made For You by Jake Owen at 92. Jake Owen's a country artist. I don't think many people need me to state that, but in case you didn't know, not really on the level of like some heavy hitters, like I guess maybe, I don't know, Jason Aldean or Luke Bryan, but he's maybe like a tier under or two. It's lyrically and compositionally, like it's a typical this is like that country music, so yeah, it just doesn't really go past that. But I thought the track overall was just executed quite nicely. The instrumentation is very organic and pretty. Nice build up to like the chorus section that the track leads up to. It sounds like a big hit, like the potential's there. But I think from like some brief information that I got about this track, this track's been out a while, so it should have been pushed out already if it was going to be a hit. But it hits the emotional appeal that country music can get to you at sometimes, if you're familiar with, I guess, some of the more sincere versions of country music, not really the bro country type. Kind of reminiscent of like 2000s country in a sense. And like I said, like the track doesn't do too much. There's some really nice organic instrumentation. It feels natural. Some sparkly piano embellishments thrown in. Lovely organ textures as well. So solid track. I give it a B+. It's actually almost got best track of the week. Next track was Zaza by 6ix9ine at 90. The track kind of opens up really ugly. Some really piercing melodic synths. Typical 6ix9ine delivery on here. He's really not changing it up much. He, on the lyrical side, on like the lyrical content, he constantly asks on the track. He keeps on asking, "Are you dumb?" So I don't know who he's referring to, but he really wanted to make that a point. He's really asking if you're dumb on this track. It sounds like 6ix9ine. The hook is kind of dumb. It's not very good. Pretty repetitive instrumental. And I will say, even though 6ix9ine's music isn't really known for being on the side of quality, or his instrumentals usually can at least have some kick to it. This really, I can't say it's even on that level either. So I give it a C. Next track was Chicken Tendies by Kane, number 88. I will say this is probably the most interesting track this week. Probably I've gotten in quite a while, mainly because of how dated the sort of sound and like I guess aesthetic on here is trying to sound like. It's a little nostalgic from like early 2010s, mid 2010s. Basically, Kane, if this track gets any bigger, is this year's Louis Capaldi or James Arthur. Seems like every year or every other year there's a white guy acoustic guitar pop, of like the Ed Sheeran school that gets massively big or has a pretty memorable hit. I can see that taking this year's spot. Although I will say Kane doesn't appear, from what I saw on a music video, he doesn't appear to be Caucasian. Not like that matters, but he fits the mold of that sort of musical style. The track honestly sounds like if Philip Phillips, their career was suddenly resurrected. I wouldn't bat an eye if someone told me, hey, this is Phillips. He sounds British, but I don't know. The production is exactly the same as what you'd expect from like a Phillips song, or maybe an artist of that sort of category. Some quarter note bass drum hits that are exactly the same. They're like carbon copied. Like I said, the only thing this track really has going for it, it makes me feel a little nostalgic. And then it also has the oh, like sort of bridge thing going on here. That's very typical of the style. And then there are textures like this eerie organ that would have been nice to hear pop out a little bit more, but it's just so buried underneath everything else. The beat sounds cheap as well. It sounds like it was made in a basement. And then Kodak just sounds Bush League on here. I don't really know too much about Kodak's music for obvious reasons. He hasn't really been putting out music lately, but even then, I can remember like his earlier work sounding so much better, and even like the rap and the delivery and I guess the presence he has on here is just minimal. This track even sounds dated. It sounds like a poorly produced track from like the 2000s. I gave this track a C. Next track was Test Drive by Ariana Grande at 61. Not much to say about this track other than it's off the deluxe release of her latest album. It's very perfect at accomplishing that sound, I will say, but I give it a C. Next track was Hit Bout It, featuring Kodak Black by Lil Yachty at 67. This track, it wasn't a highlight at all for anything in Yachty's discography. He's off the beat when he raps. He doesn't really try to match up at all. I know that's a sort of a thing, but it just sounds sloppy in this sense. Other rappers that do it, they at least do it with some charisma. And then Yachty's vocals are mixed extremely low. It causes for indiscernible delivery. And then in terms of like the beat and like instrumental, but this track has some sparkly instrumentation, especially with like this high pitched synth material going on. It sounds exactly like a lot of the tracks that were on that last album. But the track has some richness to it. It's lush and smooth on parts of it. But I can see why this made the deluxe version of the album, because it's very B-side sounding, if that makes sense. I gave it a B-. Next track was Telepatia by Kali Uchis at 54. Kali Uchis is an artist that I really think she might be underrated, according to maybe some people that really dig her stuff. I've never personally gotten too into it, but I won't say that I've ever heard a Kali Uchis track that was terrible or just off-putting. I'm just not too familiar with her discography. But this is a good track. It's relaxed in nature. There is some pretty dominant bass on this track, I will say, that can be a bit too much. I like that there's some Spanish vocals on here, though. And it's a moody track. Like it has its qualities that make it, I guess, very smooth. There's a nice smooth transition to the chorus. And then in the chorus we even get like this buttery smooth bass line that pops in. That makes the track a little bit better. Some pretty and like vocal harmonies as well that I dig. It's just kind of like a vibey track. And if you can get into it, I think people would really like it. I give it a B. And now we're at that point of the show where we do best and worst track of the week. I always start on worst track of the week. So we end on a positive note. This week's worst track of the week was from NF. The title of the track is Clouds. NF is a rapper I'm really not familiar with at all. He has, I guess, an established career, though, because he's been around for quite a bit at this point. I guess he's been rapping since 2010. I'm literally looking at Wikipedia on here that he independently released his debut studio album in 2010. He's probably been rapping before that. But anyways... this track isn't really a good introduction, even though he does have some technical chops. He really tries to sound like Eminem, but I will say he doesn't really pull it off. Really, like on the level as like I'd expect Eminem to rap. He kind of leans more on the side of like Macklemore, if you will. But the track's aesthetic and composition just sounds like a nasty love child between Imagine Dragons and AJR. I couldn't imagine anyone would want that, but this happened, and so there's some melodramatic synthy plucked strings on here. It makes the track sound very skeletal and cheap. A bubbly chorus section that doesn't really fit or work at all. This track kind of aims for a certain level of abrasiveness, but it falters. And I feel like that's kind of hard to do on a rap track. And also including a cheap synthy gospel vocals on there didn't really flatter me all that much more either. And then also a weird level of like Eminem tribute, like I was saying earlier. But yeah. And then at the end, there's some more cheap, abrasive, like metal synthy hits that really just sound like as absurd as like a Transformers trailer. Like it literally sounds like they took the sound bits from like those action movie trailers when they're trying to make a huge, like, I guess, dramatic effect on the sound. It's like on that sort of, I guess, level of, I guess, tactics of making that happen. I don't know. The track didn't sit too well with me. Best track of the week, I kind of felt like I just kind of had to give it to this track because of the hook. I'm pretty biased because they make a Ginobili reference on this track from my favorite basketball team, the Spurs. Manu Ginobili, one of the best, in my opinion, basketball players of all time. Hello, featuring a Boogie with the Hoodie by Pop Smoke. Yes, Pop Smoke. Still dropping music after his untimely death. And I think this track technically is off of his last album, but this is like a re-release deluxe track. So this is like a B cut of a B cut, but the hook on here is just, it's typical signature Pop Smoke. He has that ass fat line that he just delivers so well. And I guess just like, yeah, that Ginobili reference just sold me. But overall, yeah, I like the somber style mood on this instrumental. Also, some weird borrowed, quirky characteristics like Kid Cudi's signature moan at some points. Don't really know if that made the track any better, but thought that was interesting. But yeah, honestly, I I don't know what to say. This is just a completely personal, subjective best track of the week because of that hook. It kind of sounds like one of the tracks that was on that Pop Smoke album, the last one. It sounds almost exactly the same, but the Boogie with the Hoodie, I guess on this track, he didn't make it worse. He at least made the track not uninteresting, if I had to say. I don't know. That's best track of the week this week. Hello by Pop Smoke and Boogie with the Hoodie. But anyways, if you made it to the end of this week's episode, thanks for listening and tuning in this week. Tune in next week as well. We'll see what we get. But yeah, if you like what you heard, like and subscribe on YouTube. Also, leave a comment, good or bad. Listen to some more album reviews. And also subscribe on your preferred, listening streaming service that you can find this podcast on. But yeah, I'll see you guys soon, and take care of yourselves.